After Christmas, I like to have just some very neutral, wintry decor, and I have several ideas for you guys today. I think you will enjoy all of these projects, and you just get a lot of winter vibes from these. Thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace. I'm Alicia. Welcome back to my viewers that come and see me each week, and hello, if you are new here, thank you for stopping by today. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy the projects, and let's get started with these DIYs. I love to incorporate books in my decor, and there's just something cozy about books in the wintertime. I am an avid reader and I always have been. Of course, now I've kind of transitioned to audiobooks, but anyway, let's get to our project here. I started with this design that I found, and I just printed this on some tissue paper. And when you do that technique, just be sure that you print on the matte side and not the shiny side of your tissue paper. And I did have a little bit of my design that ripped, so I just trimmed that off from the washi tape that I used to tape that down onto my printer paper, and then I was just able to piece that back together. And I had already painted the cover of this book. I like to pick these up when I find them at the thrift store. I always get the hardcover ones, of course, and you can just do a lot of different things and change up the design for these to match different seasons or your decor. So I just took some Mod Podge and just put a thin layer all over that first side of my book. I wanted to get that first piece down, and I just smoothed that over the spine to start with and just worked from the center outward with my fingers just to make sure I had that pressed down firmly. You could probably let your Mod Podge dry first and then iron that on with a mini press if you wanted to. I just thought I might get this better applied on that spine if I went ahead and attached that while the Mod Podge was still wet. So I did just flip that over and just applied another layer of Mod Podge to the second side of my cover and just repeated those steps until I had my design completely pressed down firmly. And just be sure that you work carefully when you are doing projects with this tissue paper, and don't use a lot of Mod Podge because it will just get too wet and rip your design. So just to piece that back together where it had ripped, I just added a little bit extra Mod Podge and placed that down in that area. Just tried to line up all of the design. And I did use my heat tool just to help dry my Mod Podge a little bit quicker so I could move on to the next step. And I just took a jumbo fingernail file and just filed off any of that excess tissue paper once that Mod Podge had completely dried. And I just love the design in this image. It just looks like a very cozy, cold winter's day with some trees in the background and just an old cabin there. I just loved all of the vintage vibes from this. And just to antique this a little bit more, I did take a little bit of my Waverly Antique Wax and a foam brush and just went over all of the edges and the design very lightly. And this just kind of pulled out some of those wrinkles and things that I got from the tissue paper. And I just wiped back any of that excess wax with a paper towel. And of course, just repeated all of those same steps for the back cover of my book. And just to seal everything in and protect my image, I just put another thin layer of Mod Podge over the entire book. And while we're on the topic of reading, I would love to know what some of your favorite books are. Let me know in the comments. I'm a huge fan of Amish fiction, Christian fiction like the murder mysteries and things. I just like to read, and I like to read cookbooks, just all kinds of different genres. So let me know some of your favorite books in the comments below. And this is just some antique wax with a little bit of water. I just watered that down a little bit. I wanted this to kind of act like some distress ink. I didn't have any on hand while I was doing this project. And I had just printed out a couple of pages from a C.S. Lewis book. This is the Chronicles of Narnia. That's one of our favorite books. Me and my kids listened actually to all of those audiobooks when they were younger, so that's just one of our family's favorites. And I wanted to antique my printer paper just a little bit, so I just used that mixture that I had made, went over the entire page, and then just did some splatters on that and just kind of dabbed those off with a paper towel and got the look that I was going for. If you do have some of that distress ink, you would probably just want to use that. It will be a little bit easier process and your pages wouldn't kind of wrinkle and crinkle up on you after they dried with this water and antique wax mixture. So I just opened my book to about the middle and I just measured out how much I would need to trim off of these pages that I want to add to the center of my book, and I just cut those down. You can just press firmly if you want to and get kind of a crease mark that you can go by, or you can just use a pencil and just mark whatever portions need to be trimmed off of your pages. And I just used my paper cutter to do that so I would have nice clean edges to add to my book. And of course, you could pick selections from a favorite book that you have, whatever that you want to do for this project. I just really like the idea of having this open on my coffee table, and we would be able to see some pages from one of our favorite books. So once I had both of my pages trimmed down, I just used an Elmer's glue stick and glued down both of my pages to my book. And once your glue is dry, that is it for this project. I love the way that this one turned out. I think I need to do several more of these, and I could add pages for the other volumes in the Chronicles of Narnia series. But I absolutely love the vintage and winter vibes from this project. I love to do DIY projects with mason jars, mainly because I always have a lot of these on hand. We can a lot in the summer and the spring, so I am never without jars. I may have to look sometimes to find particular ones that I want to work with, but I did have a quart-sized one and a pint jar and a little smaller like jelly jar for this project. And I had just cut out some snowflake shapes, and this is the Dollar Tree vinyl, so I had to be careful as I was removing the backing from this. I didn't want to use transfer tape for this project because it's just really easy to apply these as stickers, but this is that Dollar Tree vinyl, so it is a little bit thinner than maybe the Cricut brand or another brand that you may pick up. So just be careful if you are working with a more detailed decal like this one. So I just placed my largest snowflake on my quart-sized mason jar, and I just worked my way out from the center and just applied that snowflake. And then I just added a smaller one to my pint-sized jar in that corner. And then I also had some letter stickers in my stash, and I just spelled out "Let It Snow" on my smallest jar. And I also took all of the centers of the 9s, the 8s, the O's, whatever that looked like a little snowflake dot, and just put that all the way around this smallest jar. And I just took these outside and gave them a couple of coats of this 2x paint plus primer in a white color. And I did let those cure for about 24 hours before I started removing my decals. And of course, again, this is that thinner vinyl, so it did not pull off in one piece. So I just worked carefully all the way around each of my jars until I had all of that vinyl removed. And I did try to be as careful as possible with this weeding tool. I didn't want to scratch up any of my paint that I had put down. And I think this snowflake design is one of my favorites. It is just very detailed, and I think this one is just really pretty, and I can't wait for you guys to see the finished product and the effect with this project. And I just added some rice to the bottom of each of my mason jars and added a candle to each one. And you can use the battery operated LED candles if you don't want to use an actual flame, whatever that you have on hand. But I think these are just a very simple and elegant way just to add a little bit of winter decor to your home this year. What do you guys think about this one? This next idea would be a super fun one to do with your kids or for a ladies' craft night. You want to get some of these wooden boxes, and I picked mine up at Hobby Lobby, and I just removed any of the price tags, and I also removed the hanger. That just made it easier to stain my project. And I just used my antique wax from Waverly, did a pretty heavy coat all the way around the edges of my box. And we are going to be creating a shadow box with these, and I love making those, and I really like the way this one turned out and styled for winter. And I also just went around all of the inside perimeter of the box, and I also stained the outside edges too, just to make sure everything looked cohesive. You could also do the back if you wanted to. I just opted not to do that because I will not be seeing that once I have these displayed. And I am using this cardstock that I found, or scrapbook paper, excuse me, from Hobby Lobby, and it was just in one of their Christmas or winter packs. I can't remember which one. I've had this for several years, and I just like this design with the sleds, and I just laid that on the top of my little shadow box and just pressed that down firmly, and that just gives me the lines that I can go by to cut this out. I did have to trim that up just a little bit so that it would fit on the inside of my shadow box. And I just used an Elmer's glue stick and glued my scrapbook paper to the inside of two boxes. I'm doing two of these because of where I want to display them in my home. Of course, you could just do one if you want to. And then I did take some more of that antique wax and just go over the edges and the corners of that scrapbook paper. This just kind of blends everything in, and also, of course, just gives me a little bit of distressing. And I had several snowmen and trees in my stash. These larger ones came from Hobby Lobby, and all of the smaller ones I picked up at Dollar Tree. So for my snowmen, I just painted their top hats black, of course, and the bodies white. And I did the same thing for these little mini ones. Look how cute those are, you guys. I love little mini things like this. Just kind of, I don't know, takes me back to my childhood. I always enjoyed like the Polly Pockets, just all of the smaller toys. So I think that's why I still like the mini brands and things like that now. Do you guys like mini brands? Let me know in the comments. And just for my trees, I just painted those. I believe this was the fern green color from Waverly. And I wanted to add a little bit of snow to my snowman's top hats. So I just used that white chalk paint and just added a little bit of snow here and there. And I also added some snow to my trees as well, just to look like this was a snowy winterland. And then I just started playing around with where I wanted to place all of my snowmen, and I also had some different sizes of bottle brush trees. So I just did a dry fit and kind of just played around with the placement until I was happy with the way that that looked. And then I just started gluing everything down with some hot glue. And I also added a little snowman and a couple of the trees on top. I thought this just was an extra added touch of cuteness to this project, and I did want to add a little bit extra snow. So I just took some hot glue and just put that in different areas on the top, and I did it also inside my shadow box and just used some of this glittery faux snow that you can find at the Dollar Tree and just put that on the hot glue. And that is it for this project. Once you have as much snow as you want, this one is ready to be displayed. What do you guys think about this one? We started with a book project and we're going to end with a book project. We're kind of book ending. You see what I did there? That's terrible. Sorry, you guys. I couldn't resist, but that's awful. But anyway, I had some more books in my stash, and of course, all of these came from the thrift store, and they are the hardback ones. And I'm using 3 different colors of chalk paint in some neutral colors. I had plaster, sandstone, and white, and I'm going to be painting each of my books with one of those paint colors. And I just started on the inside, and I did use my little heat tool to help me in the drying process since I'm going to be painting several of these at one time. I wanted that process to speed up just a little bit. You know, it's just terrible to have to wait on paint to dry. That's one of the most boring things ever when you are working on projects and DIYs. And I have other things I need to be doing besides waiting for paint to dry. But I did do 2 coats of each of my colors on all of my books that I'm going to be using for this project. And this dark blue book will have a little bit of a different finish than the other ones. I just did kind of a light dry brushing with this white chalk paint. I really liked the look that I got when I was painting over that black and the blue. I just really thought this one kind of looked like an older leather bound book, actually, just from the effect that I got from dry brushing that paint. You guys will have to let me know if you like the way that this one looks versus the other ones for this book stack. And here I have some more of that Dollar Tree vinyl, and I just cut out those snowflake shapes and just weeded everything out and got these ready to apply to one of my books. What do you guys do after you take down your Christmas decor? Do you have winter decor that you put up until you are ready to decorate for spring? Or do you just transition back to your normal everyday decor after Christmas? I like to have just a few simple pieces to add that are wintry. It's really hard for me to put out my flowers and my birds and things like that when it's still so cold and dark outside. So I do like to have a few winter pieces to put out, something that is easy to do and easy to store as well, because we all know that it is a lot of work to get our Christmas decor up and then take it back down and put that into storage. But let me know in the comments below. And to apply my snowflake decals, I am using my paper transfer tape. I just like to use this when I am doing a project that has paint applied to it already, because of course I don't want to use a really heavy tack transfer tape and remove any of my paint. So I just used this paper transfer tape and applied my snowflakes just in different areas that I thought looked the best on this one particular book. You just want to press that down firmly and make sure that you don't have any bubbles or wrinkles, because that will affect your finished look that we are trying to get here. And this Dollar Tree vinyl was just a little tricky to get to apply well to that painted surface. So I just removed that transfer tape very slowly, and I did have to just apply some pressure with my fingertip here and there just to make sure all of that vinyl was going to stay where I had placed it. And of course, I just repeated all of those steps with all of my snowflakes until I had this book covered as much as I wanted to. So to give this book a very vintage and old vibe, I just grabbed my antique wax from Waverly and a little foam pouncer. Just put a very light amount on the end of that foam pouncer, and I just went over all of the edges and just pounced up and down on the snowflake design. And this just adds a little bit of color over the top of these. And once you remove that decal, you will still have that snowflake design, and I just love, love, love how this one turns out. I can't wait to show you this. And I just added as much wax as I wanted to until I liked the look. And I also took just a baby wipe and just helped me kind of wipe back some of those heavier areas of that wax. And this was just a super easy and fun technique. And once I had all of that wax removed and I was happy with the way that looked, I started just removing each of my snowflake decals, and of course worked very carefully with this. And look at that, you guys. Can you see that detail already just popping from that snowflake decal? I love this one. This will be super fun to do with a lot of different designs, and then you would just have a very vintage look to your finished book. But this one was so much fun. I was actually very pleasantly surprised with how this one turned out. I wasn't exactly sure if I would get the look that I wanted to, but this one is absolutely perfect. Now on to my next book. I had some lace scraps in my stash, and I knew I wanted to put that on my book somehow. Just wasn't exactly sure if I wanted to do a large piece, halfway covering the front cover, just strips on the bottom. So I just played around with that and decided to do some smaller pieces. So I just cut that down to size and got those ready to apply to my book. And to attach my lace, I'm just going to be using some Mod Podge. You could use the Aleene's Tacky Glue, that would work as well. I just used a paintbrush and just spread that out in a thin layer. And I also just added a little bit on the inside flap of my book because I want this to, of course, wrap around and have this look nice and finished and professional. So I just held that down in place and added just a little bit more Mod Podge as I was just continuing to work around that front cover with that lace. You just want to press that down firmly, and then you will just have to add a pretty heavy layer once that you have that down, and that will just hold all of your lace in place. And I just used a canning ring to prevent my book cover from sticking to those first pages in my book while I was continuing to work around and just get that Mod Podge applied, so I knew this lace was going to stay where I wanted it to and not come off. And you just want to continue working your way around the spine and the back cover of your book with that Mod Podge and your lace. And I wanted to add just a little bit of detail on the front of this, and also to hide that seam where I had applied the lace. So I had just this ribbon in my stash. This one comes from the Dollar Tree. You can find it pretty regularly. Sometimes it might be hard to find, but I just used a bead of hot glue all the way around the front, the spine, and the back cover of my book. And also I had just a little bit of hangover to wrap that around each cover of the book. And of course, I wanted this one to look like it had been on a bookshelf for a very long time and well loved. So I just took some more of my antique wax and went all over the front and the back covers, along the edges, and also along the pages as well, just to make this one look more distressed. And that is it for my winter book stack. Let me know which one of these is your favorite. I think I would have to say the Snowflake one is my favorite, but I still love how the other two turned out as well. So that wraps up these winter DIYs. I hope I gave you guys some inspiration for some wintry projects that you want to add to your home decor this year. If you enjoyed these, please give the video a thumbs up, and I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And if you can find that hype button, please click that. That really helps my channel to grow, as well as clicking that like button. Thank you guys for spending some time with me today. Stay warm and cozy out there, and I will see you in the next one.